Peter, I'm just hearing of some huge resignations. Wow, from Lee Anderson and Brendan Clarke-Smith. Over to you again.
Goodness, well, that's very interesting that they have resigned from their positions as deputy chairman of the Conservative Party. There's quite a few deputy chairmen and chairwomen. I think there are 8 or 9 of them, but possibly jumped before they were pushed. Very interesting. The big question for Rishi Sunak is, was he going to sack them today for defying the Conservative Party and defying his will on this? Very interesting they've chosen to go. I spoke to Lee Anderson a little bit earlier on. He was keeping his cards close to his chest, didn't give anything away that this was coming, although I did ask him about that particular issue and these amendments. Absolutely fascinating that that has happened, and a big focus for a number of Red Wall MPs is Lee Anderson. He's seen as something of a leader for them, so it'll be very interesting to see what he does next. And I think Rishi Sunak's leadership is a little bit weakened by that move. Certainly both Lee Anderson and Brendan Clarke-Smith. The question is, could there be others, some sort of domino effect?
Thank you very much. Lots more to come on those resignations and everything else going on in the House of Commons. Welcome to The Talk. I'm Daisy McAndrew. Tonight, the battle is underway for votes on the government's controversial Rwanda bill, as you were just hearing. We are following it all live, of course. And the post office scandal hero, Alan Bates, warns MPs that victims will die waiting for their compensation. Gary Lineker is praised by supporters of the terrorist group Hamas over his anti-Israel tweet. All of that to come. Joining me, Esther Kraku, Ian Collins, JJ Anasobi, and Kevin O'Sullivan. Well, let's go back to what is going on in the House of Commons. We're hearing that both of those deputy chairmen have resigned because they were told, I gather, that if you vote against the government, you will be sacked. So they've jumped before they were pushed, clearly indicating they are going to rebel. They are going to ignore this 3-line whip. Ian, how bad could this get for the government?
It's probably not as bad that they're going to lose the vote. But that, of course, isn't the big issue here.
Yeah.
The big issue is, and the quote that that Peter reminded us of just a second ago, the Norman Lamont quote from 1993, the Conservative Party are in office but not in power.
Yeah.
There's really something in that. And this, of course, will do nothing to address the multifarious issues that Rishi Sunak has. People like Lee Anderson were really crucial to the inner circle of Rishi Sunak, even though he was deputy chair and there's about 1,000 deputy chairs.
5 of them.
Yeah,
down to 3 now.
Indeed, down to 3. But nonetheless, it's absolutely key that people like Lee Anderson are seen as being partly on side because they address that sort of slightly more right-wing side of the party. The fact that he's gone leaves Rishi Sunak weaker, if it's possible to be weaker, than he was an hour ago.
I think the poll that came out yesterday has spooked so many of the Tory MPs, and now they're just fighting for their own futures. They don't care about the party. Lee Anderson doesn't care about the Tories as a whole.
Correct.
He wants to make sure that his constituents see him as being the one who stood up against Rishi Sunak, so they vote for him at the next general election. That's all I think this is about.
Still be lucky to win it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty generous. I mean, you have to question whether this is worth tearing the party apart for, but actually it is, because the most recent polling from YouGov, which I think was done in November, shows that actually 48% of the country supports the Rwanda policy because they don't see an alternative. And because the National Crime Agency said, unless you actually deport these migrants to a third country, you're not going to have any incentive for these people to stop coming over. And when you actually poll Conservative voters, it goes up to about 77% in support. So actually the Tory MPs know that, and as much as this seems like a kind of throwaway issue because only about 10 people will ever be sent to Rwanda, if we're being honest, it's actually very important to them because they need to see that the government is taking this matter seriously. We have this idea of luxury beliefs, that the kinds of people that are opposing this Rwanda policy don't actually have to deal with the consequences of illegal immigration and mass migration more broadly. But actually, if you poll people in sort of the coastal towns in this country, it really matters to them. And that's the thing most people in Westminster just don't seem to understand.
Yeah, but that may be the case about the principle of immigration. People are worried about our borders. They voted Brexit and we don't seem to have sealed our borders at all. But in terms of the Rwanda bill itself, I think people are seeing it for what it is. It only ever was ridiculous tokenism. Hey, we're going to threaten 200 people that they might end up in East Africa. Yeah. Hardly a deterrent to hundreds of thousands of them coming across.
Well, it wouldn't have been a deterrent if you'd actually send everyone there.
Yeah, but they never will send anyone there. That's the point, which is why this circus, Rishi has treated it as this weird circus, this strange hill he seems to want to die upon. you know, trying to get this through. In a way, I mean, it will eventually limp through when all these amendments are kicked out. It'll limp through. He'll have lost two very important lieutenants, particularly Lee Anderson. And this will be seen as his funeral march.
But
I mean, this is it.
Kev, it's also then got to go to the House of Lords as well.
Yeah, well, then it's going to get kicked.
And then it's going to get kicked out, and by then there'll be a general election, and the entire party will go.
They'll get it through. The law, in the end, they'll invoke the Commons' right to overrule the laws. They'll do that, but it'll be kicked around with really bad publicity in the laws. It'll come back. Rishi Sunak is proving that he's absolutely run out of options. Look what he's actually doing. Think about it. What he's saying is, you know, I'm not going to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, and that's because in the end he's risk averse and he's never seen a globalist club that he didn't want to be a member of. But then he turns round to Lee Anderson and the gang, saying, I'm not going to leave the European Court of Human Rights. But if they say that the flights can't take off, I'm going to overrule them. He wants to have his cake and eat it too, and it's an absolute mess.
But I think the wider issue of this, we talked a little bit about it last night on the programme, didn't we, with Ed Vaizey. I mean, this is what the Tory party do. It's invariably it's over Europe, but I mean, this is sort of has a connection.
But this is egregious.
But they eat themselves from within.
But even by their standards, they are falling apart at the seams.
Oh, completely. And they're gone for a decade unless there's a miracle that happens.
I've just been ploughing through the rather lengthy letter that Brendan Clarke-Smith and Lee Anderson have jointly written, letter of resignation. One letter of resignation.
Almost as if they wrote it earlier today.
Yeah, exactly, 2 for the price of 1. We've got here, and it is a long letter, but I think the most significant bit is it says, in the past, we've signed amendments, voted for 10-minute rule bills, spoken on various occasions to the media to argue that safeguards need to be put in place to make sure our legislation is watertight. It's therefore important in terms of credibility that we, that's we, Brendan, and we and me, Lee, are consistent with this. They go on to say, we've already had 2 pieces of legislation thwarted by a system that doesn't work in favour of the British people. It's for this reason we've supported the amendments in this bill, not because we are against the legislation, because like everyone else, we want it to work. The task isn't an easy one. Blah, blah, blah. And they're actually quite complimentary about Rishi Sunak, sort of saying, you know, we do this more in sorrow than in anger.
Yeah, but they always do
and
that
so on.
bit. I really admire you. Thank you so much.
Exactly. Thank you so much.
Brackets, I hate you.
But the point
That's
is,
what it really means.
the point is they are right, because if you look, the Rwanda policy isn't going to work, and that is fundamentally flawed. We know that. But in terms of if you want to have a Rwanda policy, then you've got to have all of the safeguards in place. So you either have it or you don't. If you have it, you need what Lee Anderson is talking about.
The thing is, you have to question what the point of the Rwanda policy is. The reason why it's not working is because it's been tied up by the courts and this cabal of human rights lawyers and all of that. Actually, if you poll the British public, which seem to be lost in all of this, they support it because they think it's absolutely ridiculous that all you have to do is take a boat from France and claim to be in such a sorrowful
You think that the threat of sending 200 people to East Africa
that's the problem.
every now and again is a deterrent?
Everybody that has stepped onto British shores.
Esther, that's the problem.
But actually,
it doesn't matter what. Well, it isn't.
Esther, hang on. Let's not talk over each other. I think if you poll people and say, do you like the idea of deporting illegal immigrants to another country and getting them out of Britain?
For process.
Probably 90% of people would say yes. And then if you say, but do you actually think that these flights will ever take off? Do you think this is we're going to spend millions on legal fees? Do you think this is going to, if we tell you this isn't going to make the blindest bit of difference, I think you'll then get a very different answer.
But
it all depends on whether it's going to work.
Comes down to the people's frustration with this, because if the British public are saying enough of this, these people shouldn't be allowed to take a dinghy over and come and stay and be reaping our asylum system for all it's worth. And you're not willing to do anything about it, then where do they go? This is when people go to extremes.
In an ideal world for Rishi Sunak, this gets through the Commons, it gets through Lords, get the flights off. As Kevin says, 200 people is not going to... It's going to make a deterrent. It's not be a deterrent at all. It will be no deterrent.
That's not a deterrent then, is it?
That's the problem.
And after summer comes and we have more people coming across on the boats, we've got some calmer weather before he calls a general election, the British public would look at Sunak and go, well, you've wasted hundreds of millions of pounds getting this bill through. It's been a complete failure. You are the worst Prime Minister we've ever had.
But that is the point.
And I think one of the other issues that was brought up a few times in the debate, I watched quite a lot of the debate this afternoon, people saying, if a pregnant woman getting on a dinghy and putting her life and the life of her unborn child in danger isn't a deterrent, why on earth would Rwanda be a deterrent? As in, these people are putting their own lives in danger every single day. You would have thought that would be a deterrent. The thought of never actually being sent to Rwanda, but being told, ooh, you might get to go to Rwanda, but you might not. That is not a deterrent, because most people are clever enough to work out it's not going to happen.
This is what the British public aren't buying, and that is the government's resolve about actually solving the migrant crisis. You know, Rishi has seamlessly gone from I will stop the boats till I might reduce them a bit. Cameron the other day said, oh, well, you know, people say we could turn the boats back to France. He said, that is not an option for us. Well, it could be if you had any resolve. People do not trust that this government really wants to solve this crisis. And part of that is because Rishi Sunak, he doesn't want to...
Well, that's a good point. Rishi Sunak's heart has never been in this.
Yeah, exactly.
David Cameron doesn't really believe it. James Cleverly doesn't
All
really
right,
believe it.
chaps,